Hello, everyone. Welcome to at Seth YouTuber, not to be confused with the other Seth. So, I got paid a lot of money to make this video, and I won't lie, I'm a bit of a student on this topic. So, I brought with me the bowl of carbohydrates himself. He has finished his excursions in the Badlands. Noodles rose from the ashes and told me Naruto is multiversal, and I was like, what in the like, I was in utter disbelief that, this guy, he's this powerful Naruto debater, man. He's like, yes, Naruto can really destroy a multiverse. I was like, okay, all right, he's the man. So, like, I got my contract out, and I hired him like John Wick, and we're going to get him to explain to us why Naruto is universal. But I will placate a bit and say that I do believe that the universal Naruto arguments are not actually invalid in really any capacity. I think that just off the bat, just introductory wise, that it is sort of interpretive, so it can easily be interpreted either or. However, Noodles, you are a debater, so you are probably going to argue that you believe it is the stronger position. So with that being said, let's hear why that is just right off the bat. And since this is a dono video, I am going to go pro Universal Naruto team. So if you like that, you're in for a treat. But yeah, so go ahead, Noodles. What would you say is like your first go-to? Like, this is pretty strong case for why I think this is.
Yeah, real quick, just to add on to what you said a minute ago, like, everything here that we're going to bring up is open for interpretation, like Seth said. Like, these do tend to be, like, high-end, like, extrapolations on feats and statements and stuff, but like he said, too, I do believe these are really strong and consistent throughout the series. So, if I were to, like, pinpoint what I usually go to when I first start, like, a debate or an argument with somebody, I always, like, point to Kaguya, because Kaguya is, like, the first character in the series that we ever see do, like, some crazy Dragon Ball Z, like, dimension destruction and creation feats. So, like, the most obvious one is just talking about when, like, Kaguya summons her eternal truth-seeking orb to completely wipe out her dimensions and spaces that she had summoned Sasuke and Naruto into. And it directly, like, even says in the data book that she was going to turn everything to nothing, which, if you know what a truth-seeking orb is, the entire idea of a truth-seeking orb is to completely erase an object. And her eternal truth-seeking orb is the same as a regular truth-seeking orb. It's just absolutely massive, and it's going to, like, completely expand and wipe out every single dimension that she had created. And, like, Black Zetsu even says that it's going to create a whole new space and things like that. So, yeah, like, I generally point to that. And there are some, like, arguments about, like, the size of these dimensions. Usually back in the day, people would argue they're, like, solar system size. I'm sure you remember those arguments from, like, 2018, 2019.
Yeah, I was one of the ones who sort of pioneered the calcs for that, because I was like, well, even just sort of lowballing the planet and the space around it has to be extremely massive. Like, if you actually take, like, a graph and you show the Earth to just the moon, and then you were to draw a circle encompassing both, that's how big that expansive truth-seeking orb is. And let's be honest, it's not just expanding in one direction that way, right? So we were like, well, this cannot just be a planetary attack, right? Like, just even based off the moon and the planet within it. So even just the idea that it's just planetary was always sort of like missing some data. And then, arguing even further, I think it's just like a weird planet, moon, and then a star within it. That also was a little bit strange, especially based on the Otsutsuki lore, where, I'm going to be honest, they're trying to replicate Shibai, who is creating just universes in general, like, and then having omnipotence over them like a writer. So even then, that was a very, I want to say, just too literal. I want to say overly empirical stance. Well, all we see is possibly a light source, so therefore there's only a light source sort of thing. And even the video games, they show sort of like a cosmos, or like at least a nebula around it, which is not in the manga, but the alternate media does sort of support that notion that, yeah, maybe just saying it only has a star and a planet is a bit reductive. So I do see, why that is. Also, it's not just destroying the matter in that space, it is destroying the actual time space of that area, which is sort of borderline unquantifiable. I know back in like 2015, people would say that in itself is like fourth dimensional to do something like that. But it's sort of
Yeah.
inherently reductive, like most of the calcs. So when you hear solar system level Kaguya, I'm not gonna lie, that's just the absolute bare bones you can say, just being a about it, really, like if I'm gonna be honest. But even then, it's not necessarily the only interpretation, so.
Yeah, it's like those people that, like, they just absolutely need to see that it's, like, truly an infinite size space, right? Like, they want some, like, visual proof of that rather than just, like, a narrator statement or something like that, right? Like, they want some, like, they're doing the whole, like, empirical thing, like you said. They want some, like, straight-up visual proof that she's, like, obliterating entire dimensions. They don't want a statement that she's gonna obliterate the entire dimension. They want to see that. So it's like, when you're trying to argue with these people, you know, like you mentioned the planetary type arguments that were back in the day, like, oh, she's just destroying a planet. Like, is she suddenly the same level as like an incomplete Ten Tails that had like a planetary sized chakra? You know, is she that level now? Like, she's just incomplete Ten Tails level? It doesn't make any sense. Like, Jubito, incomplete Jubito was stronger than that. So it's like that. It just doesn't make any kind of like consistency check. It doesn't pass any kind of consistency check. It's just simply, yeah, like you said, like a reductio. It's not like productive to what we know with the scaling in Naruto. So like when I usually rep these stances and like talk about like the size of these dimensions, I always talk about the sensing capabilities of Naruto and Sasuke to prove how massive these dimensions are. So like when Naruto is like sensing the Limbo clones, he can clearly see them. His clones can fight the Limbo clones. And if you know anything about the Limbo clones, they're stated in the data book to exist in an extremely distant dimension, like an alternate dimension. So it's like these clones are already these interdimensional beings that don't even exist in the same plane of existence. Like, not even sensory ninjas can sense them at all. Like, they can't sense their chakra. It's because their chakra does not exist on the same plane as them. So these Limbo clones automatically just exist in an alternate dimension. And Naruto's clones cannot sense Sasuke when he's just separated into a different dimension of Kaguya's. Like, Naruto and Sasuke are both in a separate Kaguya dimension, and his clones just simply cannot sense Sasuke whatsoever. So it just goes to show that, like, these dimensions already are just completely massive. Like, even Obito, who can transport himself to an alternate time space. And if you know what a time space is, it's an entirely different timeline. Like, it has its own time in its own space. So there's even arguments that, like, this should just
right?
Yeah, it should just automatically exist, like, outside of the current timeline they're in, which easily could be the entire universe. So it's like, and, you know, we got the statement, and, you know, these are, like, the hyperbolic, like, potentially exaggerated statements, but, like, the Mangekyo can potentially see everything in the universe, as stated in the third data book, right? That's one statement that I use sometimes to prove it, because not even the Mangekyo can perceive Limbo clones. So if it's true that it can see everything in the universe, then it would reason that the Limbo clones exist outside of the universe. So the fact that Naruto's clones can sense them, but not the dimensions that Sasuke is existing in when he's split into Kaguya's realms, it shows that Kaguya's dimensions are truly that massive. And it's supported by Obito, who, like, when he connects to these dimensions, he's like, these are extremely vast dimensions. It's absolutely insane that Kaguya can even transport herself between them freely at will. He can't even, like, fathom how it's possible. And he's just someone that can just freely go into these, like, alternate timelines at will. Like, he can just do this whenever he wants. But when he connects to just one of Kaguya's dimensions, he thinks it's absolutely insane. And, you know, people say that, like, oh, yeah, well, it's not truly, like, this endless type space or whatever. And it's like, I don't know about that. There's plenty of statements that suggest that they can truly have the power of all things in nature, the power of everything in the universe. So, yeah, I think it stands to reason that these dimensions just truly are that massive. Like, Sasuke's Rinnegan can see chakra going outside of the dimension when Momoshiki is absorbing all of the chakra in the dimension they're standing in. It's stated in the Momoshiki novel that when he's, like, absorbing all the chakra around him in his fused state after he fuses with Kinshiki, that he's absorbing chakra outside of the dimension he made. And it's stated that Sasuke's Rinnegan could clearly see the stream going outside the dimension. So again, showing that his Rinnegan can see chakra exiting a whole other dimensional space. And so when you hear things like that, and you're just like, nah, it's not universal. It's like, that's an entire dimension. I don't know if people know what a dimension is, but a dimension is the entire space that you're in. It is the space
Right.
that you're existing in. So when they're able to see these extra dimensional spaces and things like that, it's pretty easy to argue that Kaguya's dimensions are just way more massive than any solar system. And you mentioned the games earlier, like the extra material support in it. There's like hundreds of thousands of stars in the sky in the game. Like you can just see that in red
exactly.
nebula.
Yeah, and a good example of this as well is if you believe that in the Boruto movie, I believe the novels support this a bit more, but in the Boruto movie, Momoshiki in his dimension, when he gets blasted into space, there's just stars all throughout the space he's blasted up to into the sky. And it's implied to be isekais or parallel universes or dimensions. And isekais, for instance, imagine like an isekai anime, right? Like when they go to an isekai in an anime or a parallel world in an anime, like the generic Moblob MC gets hit by a car and he goes somewhere else as like a superhero. Usually it's not just some like pocket realm alternate universe. Like he's actually transported to some fantasy universe with its own like laws of physics or whatever. So when these characters are stated to be creating or inhabiting or controlling or absorbing all the energy of isekais, it is rather significant. And the only reason people downplay it is because I believe of inherent biases of how strong they believe the characters are. A good example of this is many people still think that, tail beasts are mountain busters because when their blasts get knocked off into random condensed locations, it just vaporizes a mountain out of existence. Whereas we know the Nine Tails has to be able to destroy the world due to the narrative. The 10 Tails literally probably helped form the actual world, right? So like these characters tend to be downplayed because of the story, but the story supports the higher interpretation. Now, Noodles and I have a more serious collab coming up on my main channel. I'm not going to spoil it too much, but in that, I do go into detail about sort of like a common sense argument, I feel, and that is, what are the Otsutsuki and what are they trying to do, right? So when you say that these guys are basically just like these Raditz level beings that maybe can blow up a planet or some moons or like destroy a chunk of a planet, their end goal is to become a higher dimensional entity that transcends an infinite universe, right? Like to become a 4 or 5 dimensional being, depending on how you think the universe is structured, right? And so these characters, when they're downloading a bunch of data and they're progressing to the point where they're like, I'm getting up there to Shibai, like I'm kind of encroaching on the level where I can transcend. They're starting to combat beings that possess the haxes that Shibai had before he shed his, finite being. It makes you really think, are they just planet level or just solar system level? Like, how much stronger do they have to be to just transcend their physical dimensionality? Because even if they were just multi-galaxy level, Shibai is just above infinitely more powerful than them still. And so it's like, at what point do they have to even be like 1% of Shibai's power before they transcend? Like, at what point does it happen? And like, do they go from like Planet Plus to just 4D can destroy like infinite universes, like because they ate one more fruit? Like, what is the prerequisite, right? And so when you really think about what the end game is of these characters, it starts to make more sense why a higher interpretation is possible, because even small fragments of one tree that they eat can blow up the planet, right? The Nine Tails can blow up the planet, and the Nine Tails is just a fragment of the 10 Tails, and the 10 Tails is just one of probably hundreds or dozens, we don't really know, Momoshiki's implied to eat a bunch, of what it takes to even reach Kaguya's level or Momoshiki's level. And then maybe dozens more or however many more, and then you reach Shibai's level. At what point are they just no longer in that tier? Or does it just not make any sense? So
yeah,
that's why I think the narrative actually does support probably a higher interpretation for the celestial entities. Maybe for like the pre-Six Paths cast, you can try to like goon it a bit and be like, well, no one really scales to them after they get true Six Paths. Like maybe after like God Tree Madara absorbs the tree, or like Six Paths Naruto comes in and bullies him before he eats the tree or whatever. You can just say that maybe they don't have like scaling chains to the Naruto series too well. And then these Six Paths characters are sort of disconnected with the celestial tier, and maybe it helps you cope, right? But that narrative is supported unironically, right? And it has to be. Like, they're going over samsara and these eternal cycles made by these godly, higher dimensional entities which they seek to defy. So being able to destroy a planet doesn't seem to cut it when it comes to that, right? So
yeah, and like just talking about like the narrative supporting it, when you look at like data books and things like that, like it's stated in the head data book that Hagoromo was able to create everything from nothing. It stated that he's able to be a god of destruction who can turn all things to nothing, right? You know, it's just automatically saying these things about Hagoromo being like this godlike entity.
And that in itself, Hagoromo being able to create things from nothing is a divine attribute, right? So like when people talk about, say, like, you know, the monotheistic Abrahamic God, right? Whether it be Yahweh or Allah or whoever, and they create things from nothing, it is usually attributed to the divine, because how do you create things from nothing, right? And so this is then a fragment of his mother, who then creates these time spaces from nothing, right? She can generate time, space, and energy from her own being with these abilities, and Hagoromo, being the reflection of that or descended from that, then possesses some of that ability, which is then part of the Otsutsuki trial of creating and surpassing their entire reality. So Hagoromo then in the data books has a statement, like you just said, not to interrupt you, but yeah.
No, you're good. I liked it. But yeah, that's just it's not just Hagoromo either. Like Momoshiki has statements like this. Kaguya has statements like this. As I mentioned earlier, the Eternal Truth-Seeking Orb data book, it states that the ETSO was going to literally envelop everything and turn it to nothing, right? It's like proven that these characters have this capability. Like, they're not just destroying something, they're destroying everything. Like, she's gonna wipe out the entire time space and then recreate it afterwards. That was what she was going to do. That's what Black Zetsu says. It's the start of a new space. That's what he literally says. It's going to wipe out and completely erase the existence of this entire time space. And then Hagoromo is just stated to have that same level of power. And, you know, some people try and argue, you know, the statement that, oh, well, Kaguya is stated to be way more stronger than Hagoromo or whatever. But it's like, Hagoromo fought her for 3 months. Like, 3 months straight. Yeah, they're the most relative. Yeah, they're the most relative characters in the series. And then he gets a Ten Tails amp after the fight. So it's like, exactly, and then as an old ghostly version of himself, amps Naruto and Sasuke to a point where they're able to contend with the strongest Kaguya ever. Like, right. It's insane. Like, these characters are just capable of doing things and feats that are just simply eclipsing the rest of the series. And, you know, people are like, can say that this is just too much of a jump, right? It's like way too much, but why? They're being gifted this like divine alien power where their goal is to transcend to a higher dimension. Like, Hagoromo, yes, basically did what Shibai did. And I'm not saying he's necessarily in a higher dimension, but the fact is, what they say about Shibai is that he transcended to a higher dimension where a physical body is no longer required. Hagoromo literally died and then just like came back to life as chakra and existed in a dimension, the Pure Lands or the Afterworld, where he didn't need a physical body anymore. And that's why we see him come back as, like, the spirit ghost, man.
I hate just appealing to common sense over and over again, but okay, let's really break it down, right? The son of an alien who's from a clan which seeks to become higher dimensional entities gives Naruto power. How strong does that make him? Right? Like, based off that descriptor, how strong does that make someone? The son of a being seeking to become higher dimensional gives someone power. How much power does that give them inherently, right? And then obviously you can debate how far along she is to that goal, because obviously becoming higher dimensional it's harder to become higher dimensional than it is to destroy an infinite universe. A lot of people don't know that, but you can destroy all the matter in an infinite 3D universe and you still wouldn't be 4D. Yep. You know what I mean? So when Shibai becomes 4D, that's more impressive than destroying infinite 3D matter. And people need to really kind of digest what that really means to be higher dimensional. And the way it's described by Amato is actual mathematical dimensional transcendence, not like, you know, like a weird just, oh, and maybe like a higher, like there's a higher dimension, like going to heaven or something, right? It's like an actual mathematical concept from the words of a scientist who is heavily enveloped in the lore of this clan. So like, the only thing I could really seek to do from there is just sort of explain what a higher dimensional would be, but it's just sort of like compare an infinite cube to an infinite square, right? It's just like the cube is just infinitely greater than an infinite square, right? So like that's just the only way to really, beyond infinitely greater as well, because you could fit infinite squares in that cube and it probably wouldn't mean anything. But the only thing other than that we can really go over is maybe just sort of conceptual stuff, like Naruto and Sasuke potentially representing concepts in the novels when they beat Momoshiki. I think, representing light and darkness. I believe even Hagoromo might have had like a dualism statement of like being and not being. But those sort of things may be less relevant than the points that we brought up. Madara says you can destroy all things in the universe. That could just be to scare the Kage, but I guess it could be evidence if you do think he
as
is,
far
like,
as they're aware, that's true. They've never seen anything that strong. Like...
Yeah. But other than that, there's not really too much to say other than that. I think that most of the time, that common sense argument is really the bare bones of it. And I think that people rejecting it sort of might need to be more open-minded about Bleach too. But I'll get into that later. Is there anything more you want to add before we wrap up? I think that we went over a lot, but...
Really, the only thing maybe I would answer a question you asked earlier. You said something along the lines of how powerful is Naruto when Hagoromo gave him this power. It actually tells us in the data book. It says he's gifted the power to command all things in nature. And if you guys don't know what nature is, that's everything not man-made. It's everything that's not artificial, which is the universe. So it's like... And then they state, like, several other statements in the data book like this. It's like, there's just so much consistency statement-wise, and we get feats of this. Like, Kaguya literally created dimensions. Momoshiki created dimensions. Even Jigen created dimensions. So, like, we see several characters of these Otsutsuki caliber creating dimensions. All of their goals is to achieve this higher, like, state of Keem where they transcend and become higher dimensional, and they're just all constantly gaining power. So, yeah, I just think it's more than reasonable to assume that they're able to eviscerate these dimensions and create them.
Like, here's the thing. Like, if you think Ishiki, like, represents the Dharmakaya wheel, like, he's basically on the path to transcendence, he's like the level right below the Shibai body powers, right, in the story. Some people think he's stronger than that. If the author came out and said, yeah, this guy's a universe buster, bro, that's infinitesimal compared to what Shibai is. You know what I mean? So, like, you really gotta put that, like, how strong does Ishiki have to be close to, like, transcending at all? Like, not saying he is, but, like, even if he was, like, a good distance to it, like, multi-galaxy might even be downplay, you know what I mean? Like, it gets a little
definitely
goofy.
Is.
The only thing you can say other than that is, like, Naruto and Sasuke not destroying all of reality when they attack. Same thing you'd say with Goku. Doesn't matter. They obviously don't want to destroy everything. Obvious, like, manga concessions as well. This isn't going to be like Gurren Lagann. It's obviously going to be, like, grounded on the planet or whatever. And then the one time it is shown, people do deny it anyway. So, who cares, right? Other than that, thank you for the donation, Mr. Friday. Hope that answered all your guys' questions that were curious about that topic. And, yeah, look forward to our collab on the main channel. Noodles and I are going to be working on one more video on this side channel probably soon. And I think that one will be fun. So, look forward to that.